Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Forum Friday. Today, I have Mark Florky with me, and he is our community forum manager and our Baked in Science host. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. Nice to see you again, Dr. Lin.
Nice to see you too. We do our roundup every month.
Yep, it's a month again already.
What's been going on the forums?
Lots of activity. Our stats are great. I mean, one of the things that I really like, I want to just adjust the stats very briefly, is that a huge percentage of the members are all posting and contributing and things. So I think it's something like almost 70% of our membership is participating in the group. So, thanks to you guys. I mean, it's your place. It's because you contribute, you make it what it is. So that's fantastic,
true.
Right? We have one that's quite interesting. I'd like to start off with is a lady who is in charge of the quality for a gluten-free, high protein breads in a bakery. And they're having issues with mold count in their warehouse. In other words, they're seeing moldy breads in their warehouse already. And she's wondering, asking the question about what number is acceptable. And so that's kind of, there's a few things there that kind of come to mind. One of our baker-ins, Jose.
Well, firstly, I don't think that has ever been a study that says 1% is acceptable or 2% is acceptable, right? I mean,
if you build that into your cost, that's what's acceptable.
I mean, it's whatever you can handle, honestly, right? If your boss starts saying, well, it's 5% moldy going out, I mean, what's the industry average? It's just like, throw 5% away.
Some places would cost it as what they call it a shrink.
Right. So the smaller the number, the better.
Exactly.
That is always my recommendation. There's no industry average for this.
No, there isn't. I mean, some
Especially
people have
when
circumstances they can't mitigate for whatever reason, and they accept 5 or 10% shrink. And if they can build that into their cost and still sell it for that, that's kudos to them, right?
Yeah, but
that's not a
Mark,
good way to
honestly, when you run the lines at any manufacturing facility, anything above 3% shrink is a cause for concern.
It's usually 2% or below is most common.
Yeah, I mean, but and then you add on mold. I mean, how much shrink can you really tolerate? So I'm all about zero. I'm all about zero mold.
Yeah, that should be the goal.
You're going to have production breakdown. You're going to have production contamination. Yeah. I mean, altogether, it's like 3% is already a lot. So
and there's a lot of things here. I mean, one of the things obviously is that high protein breads and high gluten breads, they absorb a lot of, or gluten-free breads, they absorb a lot of water, right? So you have to have a good bake out. So you're checking your bake thermics, right? Your profile.
Thermal profile,
that's really important, right? To make sure that you're having good arrival times and you're getting a full bake out. Also making sure, of course, that everything is cooled properly before it's packaged. Whether it's modified atmosphere packaging or not, it still has to be cool enough that you don't have moisture radiating off of the product. And then other things to look at is that if you, is your batch codes. If only 1/3 of the batch is displaying mold and the rest of it isn't on, say, day 14 or whatever it is, then there's a problem with that 1/3 of the batch in contamination or packaged too warm or something. Because if they all have the same circumstances, they'll all start showing mold at the same time. And lastly, the thing that concerns me is that if you're getting mold in the warehouse, then maybe you're producing too far ahead. That could be the other thing. If it's sitting in the warehouse for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe you need to fine tune your production a little bit more, because the idea is to get it out there and get it sold long before you have any kind of appearance of mold, regardless of the circumstances. I mean,
hey, Mark, did this person say anything about adding Calpro or, cultured corn
nope, they
isolates?
didn't. No, the only thing they mentioned is modified atmosphere packaging. And yeah, I could probably suggest that they maybe add some calcium propionate
and that's what people don't understand about is when you are a startup baker and you do your batches in small batches, you sell them off as you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you scale up.
Yeah.
And then your bread sits in a warehouse a little bit more, right? You forget the point where once you scale up, you need to add in all these, that's why they have artificial preservatives, right?
Yep.
Or calcium propionate that you can use to enhance the shelf life. And that's needed.
Yep,
that's needed
absolutely.
Not just for bottom line, it's needed for food safety. Like you don't want to be selling gluten-free bread with the perception of your customers associating your brand with moldy bread, right?
Exactly. And with gluten-free breads, you also often have the challenge of not getting as much fermentation as you would in regular breads, because the type of starches that you use, the yeast can't break it down readily, and you can't use, there isn't a gluten-free barley malt yet, so you could only use enzymes if you want to use that to help break it down, and they are of course also costly and difficult to manage in small quantities if you're not doing large batches. And so there's a lot of things: preservatives, fermentation, a lot of things to look at, and even the So Fresh bags is an option as well, right? I mean, because that can definitely kick molds in the butt as well. Quite a good job it does, right?
Yeah, and I want to just keep reminding people to stop pointing the fan onto your baked products to cool it down quickly now that it's summer. Clean out the air filters really, really well. Sanitize your areas really, really well. All these, especially in a gluten-free facility, really works.
Yeah. So
artificial preservatives, clean air, clean fingers, hands touching the product, proper packaging, proper thermal profiling, like Mark say, get the moisture out. So all these, it's not just one thing.
And I also like to remind people when it comes to clean fingers and hands, we like to use gloves. But the thing is to remember, gloves are PPE. The gloves are primarily to protect you, not to protect the bread. So if you're using it, you got to change your gloves frequently as well. In most places where I've worked, where I remember helping a friend with the airport food and stuff, where everything has to be super sanitary, right? Every 20 minutes, they have to change gloves. No matter what they're doing, they got to change gloves every 20 minutes. And if they're not using gloves, they have to do a sanitation bath to clean their hands, right?
Oh my gosh.
So because you got to keep after the bacteria, it collects, right?
It does collect.
So changing, if you're wearing gloves, change them often. That's a cheap solution, right?
Absolutely. So let's go on to the next question, Mark.
Next one is sort of about shelf life again too.
Okay.
But not about mold, for a change. This is about tortillas. And this gentleman is trying to produce a commercial style tortilla and is not having a mold issue, but he's having an issue with the tortillas starting to crack and tear after about 4 to 6 weeks. And what he's looking for is a 6-month shelf life. So there's a lot of things going on. He's got some glycerin in there.
Does he have? Well, first, my first question is, does he have oil in there?
Yeah. Let me see.
Don't put in glycerin before you put in oil.
So
don't do the difficult thing first. Do the easy thing.
He's got flour, salt, sugar, CMC, and guar, and E471. That's a emulsifier, I think.
Monondai, is that?
Sorbate, calcium propionate, bicarbonate, pyrophosphate, malic acid. Then he adds liquid palm oil, and then the same amount of glycerin. And he has, and then he adds the water. So he's using 47% absorption. That's even though he's got glycerin and stuff, that's still kind of low a little bit. That's a little bit tight for a tortilla.
Did you say E451?
471.
It is glycerol monostearate.
Oh,
GMS.
okay.
Yeah.
So
he's got everything in there and the wrong oil.
In there, yeah.
He's got everything in there, but the wrong oil.
And he's tried Corbion Ultra Fresh Premium.
Yeah. I think the formula is a little out of balance. You should be using canola oil or something like that, not palm oil. I mean, saturated fats works a little differently than unsaturated fats.
Less saturated fat, and also his flour strength is Jim Little and Yuri kind of pointing to, you might need to have stronger flour if he's using an all-purpose flour. It's not clear whether he is in the U.S. or in India or something like that.
He's in Europe for sure because they're using E numbers, right?
Yeah. In India, use the European E numbers as well. Yeah. The Middle East. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely the flour. Definitely.
Yeah. So flour is probably weak too. That's probably that because it's flaking off where the blisters were. So that sort of an indicator of weak flour as well.
Right.
And different enzyme package. Something like the enzyme, the Enzyme Innovations Fresh Ultra, Sebake Fresh Ultra, that will retard the staling. That'll keep it flexible for a long time. That would be really good. Right? That would be. I
don't know if his current product from Corbion is the right product. I would suggest to reach back out to Corbion and ask for a different product because I don't think all emulsifiers work the same way. A lot of people have, different blends for hot dog buns, different blends for tortillas, different blends for, even high gluten, keto bread. So different things. So, all right.
Definitely would be good things to do. Yeah.
So, let's go on to the next one. I saw a question on flaky pastry crust.
Yes.
What's with that one?
A lady here has asked, she's interested in learning about the science behind a flaky pie crust. She's looking into a hands-on workshop. And the pie crust is kind of as a pastry chef, to me, pie crust has always been like a shortcut puff pastry. Is kind of what I often had viewed it as. So when I teach pie crusts and things in culinary for cooks and chefs and things, is that there's basically a flaky crust and a mealy crust. What we see the most of in mass production, sort of like, the frozen chicken pot pies that are in the grocery store and things like that, that's mostly mealy crusts. And with the mealy crust, that is the fat and the flour is combined together to a point that it's like a fine little sand almost. It's not large lumps or anything. And then just enough water is added to hold the whole thing together, and then to be able to stamp them out and so on. The flakiness comes from the layering of fat with flour and water, and as steam escapes from the flour water mixture and tries to rise up, the fat layer prevents that steam from going into the dough above it or around it and creates these little steam pockets, and that produces the flakiness. So when we make a flaky pie dough, we ideally want to have all the ingredients as cold as possible, not frozen, but very cold, and break the fat up so that the fat is big lumps, like the size between a pea and a peanut, in that size, and that it's coated with flour. And this is why things like shortening, especially in the old days, the partially hydrogenated shortening, the grocery store shortening doesn't work very well anymore these days. It doesn't get as hard as the old stuff used to. So I'm a lover of lard, so I admit.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Just use lard.
Yes, lard works great. Butter is a little bit difficult because butter gets soft so easily at low temperatures, and butter has a lot of water in it as well. So while it imparts good flavor, it's not ideal for pie crusts.
Yeah.
If my recommendation for a buttery pie crust is to make a blend of your fat ahead. So in other words, like put maybe like 25% butter and 75% lard or shortening, mix that together and then chill it and break it up into lumps and coat it in your flour. And then the salt gets dissolved in the water. Some recipes also call for sugar for flavor and additional browning. Some recipes even call for some egg or egg white to be added. That is just to help in binding of the texture afterwards and stuff. But there again, everything needs to be cold so that as you add it in, the idea is that the flour is absorbing this water and forming a dough around the fat. So that is why you don't want to really knead it much. You want to just sort of toss it together, work it together till that it comes together. Let that rest for a bit in the fridge, ideally, and then just roll it out. And you don't want to rework it very often, once at the most. And usually you would take the trimmings and you would rework it into a fresh pie dough to always keep it flaky. Or what some people do is they roll their tops out first, because that's the flakiest part that we see as a consumer or, as a guest. And so that the flaky part is for the top, and then they use their rework for the bottoms where it doesn't need to be as flaky. So that's kind of so, but the science is all about physical leavening. So, and the physics of the steam rising and the fat barriers blocking it. So you have this chain reaction. So the more lumps you have coated with flour, the flakier it will be. You could see it as, especially if you're using unbleached flour and a white shortening or a lard, you can see the marbling in the dough. When the dough looks marbled, you know you're going to have a flaky pie dough.
Well, I knew you'd have the answers to the question, Mark, because you're such a great pastry person.
Oh, thank
pastry
you.
chef.
And it's
I don't know this much about pastry, but I'm here like learning all about it from you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and pie dough, some people snuff it off as being simple. It's not that. And while there's three main ingredients: flour, fat, and water. But the salt is important. Some people also add vinegar or lemon juice to it because that has a strengthening effect on the gluten. So if your flour is weak, it'll help with that. And it also will help if you're making the pie dough ahead so that it has to keep several days in the fridge. Then it won't start to get the little black spots, the mold that starts to grow in the flour because there's no yeast to ferment.
Right.
And so that it's it's nothing that's unhealthy. It's just to keep everything all at bay, right? So, and I'm always glad to share. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being the instigator of all the discussions on there. I love to see everyone helping everyone out.
It's great. There's so many conversations going on. I don't have time to get to them all, and I'm so glad the community.
And that's the way a community should work. We shouldn't be relying on you for everything.
Yep. And that's wonderful. It's really good to see.
Getting other people involved. So thank you all for coming forward and helping each other out and making this community so awesome. And thank you, Mark, for coming on Forum Friday. And I hope to see you again next month.
All right. Yeah, we'll look forward to the next one. Summer's almost over.
I know. See you later, Mark.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye, everybody.